Okay, we are live.
A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Ankita from NASSCOM. Today, I have a topic which is very much in talks nowadays, has a lot of demand and curiosity. Bots on digital channels will be the focus of today's webinar, presented by Niranjan S., Sales and Marketing Head at Simplify 360. He will share his knowledge and experience in next 60 minutes on this very topic, so stay tuned. You can ask questions anytime during the session. Niranjan will cater to them during as well as at the end of his presentation. Also, please leave your feedback post this webinar to improve my future episodes. Welcome, Niranjan, and over to you.
Thanks, Ankita. And a very good afternoon to everyone. I think over the next 60 minutes, what I'm going to do is tell you all about bots across all digital channels. So if you can just get onto the agenda first. So the base goal of this entire discussion is on how to get started on bots. How do you set up customer experiences on digital channels that are achievable? What are the KPIs for automation? And how do you extend this? So you start with one, obviously, it then kind of comes to say that you need to extend it to other channels. How do you go about that? What are the key integration criteria? Because a bot, while it's customer facing in most cases, and all the famous ones are, how does it integrate with your backend and your processes is a key aspect of success that you see with chatbots worldwide. Okay, and when you automate, one of the key criteria is also about how do you not lose your brand touch? Your brand has a tone, it has like a overall experience currently without automation. So how do you extend that to your end customers when you deploy a bot is another key criteria. And I'll also cover a few examples of bot deployments. Okay, so broadly, before getting into actual chatbots, I have a little bit on the background and the state of play, because this kind of sets the context. So there are three major parts. One is on the state of play, how this emerged, how we are where we are today. The second part is on quick tips of bot deployments, a mix of functional, technical, introspection. And the last bit is on examples of these bot deployments. Okay, so during the entire course of this discussion, during these three spots, I'll take a pause and I will try and answer your questions. Okay. So the current chatbot industry is pegged for an overall CAGR of around 29%. So that's fairly high. APAC is a lot higher. Industries like BFSI and healthcare are also like disproportionate in the interest that they're showing in the space of late. Okay, the key drivers for this, obviously COVID has come in last few months. That has become one of the key drivers for people wanting to automate, because a lot of brands are seeing an enormous increase in digital transactions, people coming online, people coming on social media, people wanting to respond on messenger apps. So that has become a key driver. But all this analysis is prior that. So even before that, this entire industry was pegged to kind of boom, depending on different criteria. Okay, but what are the key drivers? Obviously, people wanting to enhance their customer experience, their customer service. Of late, messaging platforms have become huge. So you have Apple Business Chat in the US. WhatsApp is kind of ubiquitous, but servicing on WhatsApp, what Facebook has come out with in terms of a toolkit to respond, those have improved enormously over the last 24 months. So that's another key driver, because the endpoints are now very superior in terms of how they can be to help a brand engage with their end customers. Okay, development costs for chatbots. Chatbot vendors are dime a dozen. You find people everywhere. There are platforms that do it. The Googles and Microsofts of the world do it, and there are also people offering services on this area. So the market is saturated with solutions. It's saturated with technology that is right, and there's a lot of investments in this because people are seeing returns. Okay, clubbed with RPA, which is kind of an allied area, this has become something that everyone is talking about, everyone is interested in doing. Okay, and advances in NLP and AI, obviously the advances are more in terms of execution as opposed to base theory, but that has also reached a stage where it's all come together in a way. Okay, and the main challenges in the industry today, one thing is lack of awareness about how to go about this. Vendors, people just get on board without too much of thought. So that is one key challenge, because then you don't have enough ROI to show. The second aspect that people consider less are security and privacy issues. So that is something that you should look at. The third part is localization. So when you're looking at dialects, when you're looking at like look at India itself with multitudes of languages, adoption has to include this. If your customer set has regional languages, your automation and your bot deployments have to have this, if not in stage one, at least as part of the journey that you're building in these chatbots. Okay, this is primarily the state of play. And obviously, certain industries, certain geographies grow more. I have supplied links at the end, so you can go in and read about this if you're interested. Okay, so coming to the evolution of chatbots, this is, I know it's like, why are we talking about this? But this is pretty interesting because the first bot or the first chatbot was Eliza back in 1965. Just after the slide, I'll quickly show you. I'm sure some of you must have exploded. Overall, in terms of the look and feel, the experience that you get, Eliza had what chatbots on messengers have today. Okay, but if you look at the key milestones, the first thing is everyone having a smartphone in their hand. That during the 2009-10 phase, when everyone kind of started having smartphones, and the AI boom. So that has basically phenomenally increased the availability of customer-facing applications that have a need for like automation, voice bots, chatbots, and the whole lot. Okay, so I mean, let me just show you how Eliza looks. You can kind of look at this. So Eliza was built back in '66 in the MIT labs by a guy called Weizenbaum. So this was basically built as a personal psychotherapist. I know it's a little weird. Like I am. So if you look at this, the entire design philosophy that went into building this bot is about pattern matching and reiteration of what the end respondent is saying. This was one of the first forays into actually doing a Turing test. A lot of people, even though this was built on very simplistic principles, it has almost no context. Right? At the end of the day, there is no context here in the sense that it's not taking into consideration who I am, what are my past interactions. It's just kind of taking what I'm typing here, working with existing hard-coded patterns, and let's say. So if you look at it, this is from 1966. Okay, there's a mock-up. It's just reiterating what I'm saying. It works very well within a narrow niche, and it has all the base building blocks, if you will, of what a chatbot has today. Okay, so this is to say, and even when this went live, people were like almost seeing it as human, even though the person who created it said, this is very basic, these are the base principles. It almost had a cult-like following when it came out. Okay, and then as the progression happened, we saw a lot of increasing functionalities come in, and computing along with the AI toolkits available today have made it ubiquitous across the board. Okay, so you're free to check Eliza out. It's interesting. I mean, I've looked at Eliza Jabberwocky growing up, so it's fairly fascinating in terms of seeing how it evolved. But you can see even there, when you put a little bit of thought in, when you have a use case defined, and when you're telling the people that this is a use case that you're doing it for, it resonates well with end audiences. Okay. So to kind of sum it up, there are two major areas of why chatbots are popular today. Okay, so there is an increased demand. So there are contact centers that see attrition rates that's been this in the same state of play for the last 20 odd years. Okay, and people come in, churn out, and even though that's kind of set in stone in a traditional format, having a toolkit that says I can jump in and do away with a lot of the grief that kind of traditional processes people hiring has with me is one of the key drivers. And a lot of customers want 24/7 service today. Okay, so from a demand standpoint, if I want to check a particular status, I don't want to wait for somebody to come online. I demand or I need it now. So I might be up in the middle of the night, your call center is not operational, your people are not on chat. So demand is kind of one of the key drivers. From a supply standpoint, NLP has progressed, processing speed and models and kind of real-time NLP capabilities, real-time NLU capabilities, and now increasingly NLG capabilities, which is natural language generation capabilities, have increased tremendously. Okay, and platforms are maturing. So we have core platforms which the big tech behemoths of the world provide, and we have endpoint solutions which are also fairly mature. So you can go with any one of them. Today's discussion is not about which, but it's about what do you need to do once you've done a selection. Okay, so if you look at this, this is kind of the shift of how it works. So it's kind of moving from uh, a kind of chatbot to a virtual assistant, if you will. So it's kind of humanizing the experience, automating it, and embedding the experience. If you look at this, there's a Facebook bot. The same experience, if you want to give to your customer on WhatsApp, the actual experience will differ. So those are the thoughts that we need to go in, which we'll cover over the course of the next section. And there's a quick look at the chatbot ecosystem. So you can see that it is completely peppered with various different tool providers, solutions, messaging platforms. So the messaging platforms are at the heart of it. You can see all the people who are working to deploy it, and you can also see the service providers. You can see there are so many players out here. There are people who provide managed services, there are people who provide self-serve, so you kind of just get the tech and do it yourself. It's a complex space. But at the end of the day, it's very simple when you're looking at it as a brand owner, as a CEO, as the head of marketing for your organization. There are fairly simple sets of rules, which if you keep in mind, any initiative that involves chatbots, that involves voice bots, that involves omnichannel deployments, and that involves complex processes, it kind of gets a lot easier. Okay, and these are some things, some trends that we are looking forward to for this year. This is based on research that we've seen across multiple kind of research houses. NLP and sentiment analysis in real time, it exists. Functionality has been there for a while. How do we adopt it? How do we embed it in our current tech is one key aspect. Adoption of messenger platforms. How do I get my Apple Business Chat? How do I do a chatbot on it? If I do Viber for Southeast Asia, how do I get my Viber platforms up? That's an important aspect. Commerce already exists in chatbots on web and other kind of traditional digital channels, if you will. But commerce on WhatsApp is something that is coming. They're trying to develop stuff. So that's a big area of interest. So how do you close loop a customer acquisition on a messenger journey that is automated is going to be a big thing for this year. Social media is, again, very closely linked, like Facebook Messenger is a part of social media in most cases. So it is a key ecosystem that's driving chatbots. People are expecting human responses. People are expecting brands to be quirky, to be themselves. So at the end of the day, how are you? You is what they're looking at. Voice bots. Traditionally, voice bots are deployed over multiple places. You have it on your devices, on your Alexas and Google Homes, but it's also playing an important part in your IVR process. I think this year and the next coming years, we'll see how it embeds itself into that IVR process is going to be a key aspect. And all of this generates tons of intel. Okay, we have tons of data coming up, people's interactions, your use cases, how your bots are reacting. So getting that data, embedding it in your code processes and doing optimization is another key area. So while they exist, it's not completely embedded. So that's another key area that you look at as a trend for this coming quarter, if you will. Okay, I'd like to take a pause there. So I'd like to check if there are any questions. And if there are, you can quickly hit me up before we proceed.
As of now, Niranjan, I don't see any questions. So shall we proceed?
Certainly, we can do that. Okay, I'm audible, right? I just saw a message saying that my audio is not.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I've done on this particular slide is to tell you there are multiple use cases across the board. So in terms of understanding what use cases there are, they're typically just two parts. One is sales and marketing, the other is customer service. In my head, I have these two broad strokes. You can also have a journey map where you look at pre-acquisition, during acquisition, post-acquisition. The main reason you define your chatbot use cases in this manner is because the tonality, the way in which you message the end customers, the way you handle the responses, and in many cases, you'd also want to push to a backend team, right? So let's say there's a bot that is live for an order placement, and your payment gateway is failing. It's money in bank. So those are logical endpoints that you think of where that require a backend experience. So when you're defining this, you can start with just marketing and customer service. What am I doing from a marketing and sales standpoint? What am I doing from a customer service standpoint? These are just headers. Okay, so you can typically have one single bot in one single endpoint. You'll have one Facebook page that has two different bots deployed, two different tonalities deployed, depending on the use case. And you can also offer exits to humans because humans are better at empathizing, better at thinking on their feet, if you will, where you have money in bank or where there's a churn scenario where obviously acquiring customers is much more expensive than retaining customers, right? So in those scenarios, you can design it in such a way that those endpoints exist. But broadly today, we have customer service. So anything that is grievance management, billing inquiries. Inquiries are a very low hanging fruit. So you can think of automating those on day one. So like one brand that we worked with 6 months ago, I think 20% of all their inbound queries was just order statuses. So it's as simple as saying, can I plug a back into this and can I push this into my bot, be it on my website or Facebook or increasingly WhatsApp these days? The answer is yes. So that's one key criteria that you look at. The other is product recommendation. So this is big when you have it on your website. So one of the key things that chatbots have done from a web search standpoint is they offer a visual mechanism to help your end audience search. So if you have a store with hundreds of products, yes, you have a sitemap, yes, you have a flow that you've designed, but lots of times people don't think in the linear fashion that you have put together. So at the end of the day, you can kind of make this like a visual search engine, and you can plug in a commerce aspect. You might not end up selling within the chatbot, but it gives people a lot of flexible ways of discovering what all you offer. Okay, so it gets personalized. You plug this with your backend, and you can also see the last 10 products that he's bought and recommend it in a very smart way. So that's another area. Internally, we see a lot of big enterprises doing things like HR help desk support, internal IT ticketing, IT support. Primarily, if you have like a lot of FAQs that you churn through, like if you work for let's say a gaming company that has a lot of questions and answers coming, one key bot that you could put in there is like, what are the key things in my game that this particular thing supports? So at the end of the day, you just decide on the use cases, plug it, and then kind of get on it. But the kind of current deployment state is these 4 or 5. And internal, people keep adding new use cases. Again, the cost benefit grossly outweighs the need for automation in many of those cases. Okay, so we'll get into actual nitty-gritties of how you start with your chatbot. Okay, the first thing in architecting a chatbot is research. Okay, so the biggest thing that you'll have to look at is, where's the money coming from? Where am I going to save the most money? Okay, so within these, so if you're looking at sales and marketing, what are my top ways in which people reach out and convert would be one criteria. The second part is, what are the top queries that people ask me? Okay, they could be complaints, they could be queries, they could be requests. So when you classify it like this, you take the top 10%, the top 20%, and those are typically what you start with. Okay, the second part is, it's customer facing. So how do I make sure that this is me? Okay, some brands are quirky, some brands are formal, some brands are a blend, semi-formal. So when I'm representing this, which are the channels at work? Okay. The third part is, how does it fit my needs? Okay, so you can start with a simple chatbot, a simple flow, but you can't expect it to do complex tasks. So when you're sitting, if you're the head of marketing sitting with your board and your CEO, you need to make sure that the tools that you're choosing for the job are the tools that will get the job done. Okay, if you go with a small bot that is completely flow based, you can't expect it to be like a super cool NLP bot that understands all the FAQs that are fed in, right? So those criteria have to be set. The next bit is the journey. So how's my customer journey working? Where are the maximum touch points that I see? So that is a key criteria for channel and automation selection. Okay, and one thing that I see that this is kind of almost universal today, which is backend connectivity. A lot of the time, people are so excited with the chatbot implementation that they forget. I know there are data and privacy issues when you look at backend integrations, but the maximum value comes when it actually sits within your tech ecosystem. So if it can update your CRM, if it can update your lead management system, if it can update your order statuses, if it can pull in real-time information, that is where you see the maximum value. So even though your chatbot initial implementation will be delayed by 30 days, maybe, right? That's still worth looking at when even before you start chalking it out. Okay. And you start small. So the best thing is find out. So think of it as a product. Think of what's the most valuable output that I'm getting and kickstart your journey. Okay. And the last bit is who are your customers? So if you're doing, let's say you're doing insurance for greater than 50-year-olds, you know for a fact that Facebook Messenger might not be the most convenient. WhatsApp works much better. So do you know the customers? Do you know who they are? Do you know where they interact? You do a dipstick before you launch a bot that is completely like a website bot for them. It will pretty much be meaningless if the target group and the audience expectations don't match either the channel or the functionalities that you're selecting. Okay, these are the broad principles that you fit in, and then what you can just kind of have a 3-step process. So first is what are the channels. Okay, the second, I mean, this is something again we don't think of much when we start off, because if I can be, most major chatbot players focus on English. Okay, so there's very less thought on localization. So if I'm doing tier 2, tier 3 cities primarily as my large customer base, if it does not support the languages that they talk in, it's pretty pointless. Okay, so there might not be NLP support from Dialogflow for ODI. I don't know if it has, but I'm just saying. So in those cases, you can still think of flow-based supports that will help them. So these are key considerations that go into your initial deployment mode. And backend integrations are key. Okay, so if you whatever CRM you use, you might be using even Freshdesk, Zendesk, whatever you use. At the end of the day, backend integrations into your customer endpoints are of key importance. Okay, so once you select this, let's say you choose, in this case, you might, let's say your highest inbound is calls. Okay, so your initial instinct might be to, can I put a voice bot, right? But the answer is not that simple. So if I have most calls, I think the first step would be, how do I deflect them to a non-voice channel? Because a lot of times self-service works better when I don't have people calling in, because the cost to call is obviously more than a cost to chat or cost to send out an email. Okay, but if your highest inbound volume is emails today, can I have automation in emails? Today we don't have automated emails. I think the current state is having NLG to give you suggested responses and embedding it. That's the safest if you're doing lots of mails, unless it's like order status emails, which you want to just quickly pull out, understand, and reply back. The state of email is like that. So the selection is of key importance, and also look at alternate solutions. So if it's, like I said, if you have a channel, it's also important to understand how it works with other best practices, not with chatbot fits best with the highest volumes that I have today. Okay, so this is the first step in the chat in your entire journey. The second step is a simple journey map. Okay, so like I said, at the initial architecting level, create a journey map. It's very simple. You can just draw it out on a piece of paper. Look at the stats. If you're a startup, you might not have this handy. You can work this out, crunch the numbers, see where most of your touch points are, see where it makes most sense to start automating. Okay, and just because you're a startup doesn't mean you don't have to automate on day one. You can start with like automation on day one, so you don't have to deploy a large customer service team. Okay, so it's important to chalk out this journey. It's important to also understand what are the new things that I'm going to add. So today you might not have chat. In this case, you can see chat as a channel. You might not have added web chat or in-app chat yet, but do you think you will add it in the next 12 to 24 months? So those are key considerations that you put in.
Hi Niranjan, can't hear you. We can't hear you.
CSAT, NCS in,
Hi
sorry,
Niranjan, audio was lost for about 30 seconds.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My apologies. So did you lose me at the start of the slides? Do you want me to repeat this?
Yes, you can go ahead with this slide.
Sure. Okay, so like I was saying, one of the key aspects is understanding your touch points. Okay, so draw this out on a piece of paper, find out the different channels that you think you are in today and you think you'll be in a year's time, because your overall chatbot deployment needs to have your roadmap considered as well. And also look at things that are not traditional. So can I automate my survey collection? Can I automate my CSAT NPS? The answer is yes. Right, so you can have a quick automation process that actually sends it out. You can have a two-way interaction with customers and get good feedback on your products, your services. Okay, so it's important to understand these touch points before you get started. And what I was trying to say for startups is, if you're a startup owner, a startup CEO, startup CMO, you can get started on day one. So it gives you a heads up. It kind of ensures that you don't need to have a full force customer service team if you're starting with automation on day one. So it's not something that is huge, because we have so many tools today. So you can start small and you can start deflecting and automating things from day one. Okay, and we have worked with many startups that are today unicorns that have undertaken this approach. Okay, they don't invest in the tech, but they invest in the understanding of the customer process before deploying this. Okay, so this is from a customer journey mapping standpoint. Okay. Overall, like I said, I mean, in my head, what I have is organizational goals. There are only two things here. Okay. One is, how much money am I going to save doing this? And how much money am I going to make doing this? Okay. So from a customer acquisition standpoint, any investment in this space should be about, if I deploy this, how many customers are going to onboard on this mechanism using this chatbot entirely without a fallout. Okay, that kind of helps you prep your ROI. So you might invest in a several $1,000 NLP based chatbot provider who's kind of giving you best in class everything. Or you might go and decide to build everything on your own. But I think the key consideration is, how much of this will I do? Okay, and increased revenue. So as we get to the examples, you'll see when you put in chatbots, because some chatbots are so powerful and some people had like an early advantage of deploying them before the others, it kind of becomes a channel of acquisition on it in its own right. Okay, so people can go buy tickets, they can upgrade their plans completely using your bot. Okay, so from an acquisition and revenue standpoint, that's a key consideration. And overall, in terms of inbound, it is how much do I reduce without impacting customer satisfaction. In a best case scenario, you'll have people responding to every single query, and hypothetically, that will give best customer satisfaction. But humans are like, we know that we do make mistakes. So I mean, that itself is an assumption. But overall, it's kind of understanding the cost benefit of automation, and also understanding, where do I have that high throughput, where do I have that message volume and velocity, where I should invest time in automation. Okay, overall, you can actually set plans on what cost reduction will this offer. So if I have like 50,000 inbound web chats in a given month, can I automate 20% of them? So that's a good way to look at it, and it's a good goal to work towards. Okay. So these are two sides of the pillar. So one is on, how much money am I making with this and how much am I saving? So it's a good two sides of the coin to have before you get started. Okay. This is kind of getting a little deeper. This is actually getting into the nitty-gritties of KPIs. Okay, one important aspect when you start with a chatbot deployment is KPI selection. Okay, so the first thing I would do personally is consider activation rate as a key KPI. I might have the best chatbot in the world that can respond to every single queries. It can automate 50% of my inbound. But if it's not active, what does activation mean? It means people are not used to the channel, people are not comfortable with the channel, or people use it sporadically, but then because of other reasons, they shift back to whatever they're comfortable with. Okay, one key example that I give you is, we used to work with a telco out of Southeast Asia. So everybody there loved to chat on the web chat. Okay, they used to use one of the live chat solutions. They created a bot on Viber, but at the end of the day, everybody started falling back on chat. So the only way for the brand to decide that the activation has to improve was to kill chat, which they did. It's a huge thing. I mean, at a stage when this was really like 2 years ago, when people are not even thinking of other alternates, to kill chat and kind of force people into a messaging based approach is huge. So you might have to think of those kind of thoughts as well when you're looking at activation rates, but that is what I would look at as the first metric. Okay. The second is the overall volume. So typically what happens is when you kickstart a chatbot, you will send out mails, you will market it. There will be a huge peak and then it kind of plateaus. Okay. So it is your decision to kind of continue to pepper your target group, your customers, your potential customers with the fact that you're a chatbot. So what this means is you need to place icons, you need to have your website and your apps designed in such a way that people come to here as the first port of call. Okay, the second part is bounce rate. So if I find people coming in and looking at the first message and then running away, there is something wrong. Okay, retention rate is the third. Concurrency is again important because I know that there are multiple conversations that my bot is holding in parallel. So that's another important aspect to look at. Overall, how many interactions there are. And you'll obviously set goals. So when we look at chatbot design in just a little bit, you'll see that you're going to set goals which can be acquisition based, which can be response based as key criteria or end results for your bot. So that is a key aspect that you also need to look at. Okay, other than this, if you're deploying NLP bots, you look at fallback rates, you look at like FAQs that are not answered from your knowledge base, you look at comprehension levels as key areas, and you also look at new intent and new entities during the course. And basically, these are used to optimize the bots. Okay, and post usage, it's highly recommended that you embed a CSAT mechanism for the bot and an evaluation engine. So this kind of helps you look at, you obviously have metrics, but also a qualitative way of understanding how your end audience is engaging with your chatbot is of key importance. Okay, but always at the back of your mind, it's about this. Okay, so before you get into any new use case, let's say you already have a bot in play, you're thinking of 2 more use cases, you're thinking of 3 more use cases. How much money am I going to save for the amount of time I'm going to spend deving it, integrating it, testing it, and deploying it is going to be a key aspect. Okay, so the next part is on documenting use cases. So there are 2 major ways to do this. One, I mean, if you've never done a chatbot, you're starting off with this. I prefer a user stories framework. Everyone who's done Agile knows this. So you set out a bunch of different stories. You kind of look at the persona, the action, and the outcomes, and you start jotting down what all you can do and cannot do. Okay, this has to go back in conjunction A with your channel selection, digital touch points, and who your end audience is. Okay, the other is job based. So typically this is kind of pointed. So if you're looking at a particular action that you think that your end customers will take, you kind of utilize a jobs to be done framework. But typically it's a blend. You start with the user stories approach. You can also do job based use cases as your bot evolves over the course of 12 months, 24 months. The key criteria here is not just deploying it, it's also to see if these use cases change. As with anything, your customer set is not static. Okay, so today you might have 18 to 24-year-olds as your key customer base. That might change to 24 to 30 before you know it. So looking at your TG, looking at how your products are changing, looking at how your offerings are changing also kind of gets the entire, this is something that you need to do periodically. Okay. Right. So the second part of it is conversation design. Okay. And I follow a basic thumb rule, be it deploying an NLP bot or a flow-based bot. After doing all the due diligence, A, finding out my top dispositions for customer service and marketing. B, identifying the channel of choice. I build a flowchart. Okay, similar to this is not my flowchart. Let me just see if I can show this to you in a full screen. Just give me 1 second. I'll let you know when it loads up. Sorry, it's maybe a quick time. It's loading up, so maybe a quick look at the questions, perhaps. Right. Okay. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, Niranjan, I can see getting started conversation design.
I've opened up my lucid charts. Okay, this is a quick look at the entire flow. Okay, you don't have to get into the details, but essentially what this person has done is they've identified the top use cases and defined flows. This is basically a product discovery and a purchase journey. Okay, so what they've done is they've taken out the key criteria. They've looked at the top kind of sizes and fittings and models that people want to purchase. They've gone into showcasing how the display happens. And each of these has an end goal, which is either subscribe or express interest or buy. Okay, so these are your end goals. So you start off when you kind of have done all your due diligence. This is probably the best thing to do. Put pen to paper, get these in. Okay, even if you do an NLP bot, getting these flows is important because the NLP might be able to understand everything, but you're still trying to automate just the top 20% of your use cases. That's going to give you the maximum returns. There's no point if the NLP works on the bottom 80% of responses, which very few people actually engage with. So this kind of consideration is very important to start with. Okay, so you can chalk it out. You can use a piece of pen and paper. You can use your own prototyping flowchart tools to build this. I find pen and paper convenient. You can do it how you want, but this kind of gives you a sense of how this entire thing flows. But obviously, when you deploy an NLP bot, the flows are not going to be the same. It's more contextual. It's going to jump from A to Z depending on the understanding. Over there, what happens is this is slightly more advanced, where you look at intents, at utterances, entities, and the actions. Okay, so you kind of go from a linear thought into a contextual thought. Okay, so this kind of comes with a little bit of experience. If you do a few iterations of this, you will be able to gauge and get this in order. But again, this thing has to be tracked. It's not that you do a flow, you have the intent design done on day one, and then you kind of walk away. This is a continuously optimized process. It needs you to pay attention. It needs you to kind of look at it. Okay, so changing tracks, new channels, all of these kind of play an important part. You might have the best NLP, but the moment you deploy it on a new messenger platform, let's say you've never done Viber before, you put it on Viber. Viber might have its own quirks, might have its own UX challenges that are impeding what was really good on a web-based flow. Or if you're going on Facebook, you also have additional channels, like you can have sticky, persistent carousel buttons, you can have quick calls to action. So those are key considerations that you need to have at the back of your mind. So this is typically when you're extending it from channel to channel. Okay, the next part is on actual customer experience. This is more on the lines of what you would do. Let's say it's a marketer's view of a chatbot. So one of the key things that people have preferred is a bot to have a personality. Okay, so at the end of the day, you think of the bot as a person, give it a personality. You don't have to share any of this with anyone. It's completely for your benefit. It's for your interest. But if you build in some of these quirks, it just makes people laugh. It makes people connect with it and people remember it. So if it's a bot with an interest in music and the person's chatting and somehow comes up in conversation, it kind of is additional brownie points. I know that's slightly away from the core use cases, but these are things that you can build as your core functionalities blossom. These are things that you need to look at adding on. Okay, the second part is the tonality, what your brand is. That has to come in. What you do once you have all the flows is what is the conversation. So let us say I was a person talking to the customer. I'm the CMO. I have 10 people doing customer service, or I'm the head of customer service. I have 10 people doing customer service. What is the tone that this bot needs to take? The customer is coming to buy a product from me. Is this the tone that I would want? So conversation design is really important. This is something I would recommend you never skip, because when you do the conversation design, you actually get your personality of what you think the brand is into the bot and start on day one. Okay, and it's good to experiment. It's good to have a laugh. Having a bot have a laugh is fine. I mean, it might, if you're completely formal, yes, that's something you wouldn't do. But having little quirks always makes it interesting. Okay, and up the chain of personality, when you're doing only transactions, it's vanilla. So again, look at the journey, look at the use case, and have the personality reflect the journey and the use case that the bot is interacting with. You can't have a bot laughing when a customer is coming with a grievance or a complaint. So it needs to have that blend and that balance. So getting that blend is right, getting that balance is important. So it's highly recommended that you do this persona design. If you're doing voice bots, it's even more important. That's an up and coming area. But on chat, it's easy. You have an image, you have a look and feel of your, let's say you're doing a web bot, the look and feel of the widget in which your chatbot sits, the color matching your brand, the person matching a person in your organization. Okay, I see lots of Indian brands come in with a picture of a lady who's nowhere Indian. She looks like from Scandinavia. So that doesn't work. It doesn't cut the mustard. So you need to kind of look at it. And it's also about the delivery. When the messaging is happening, how do I make it sound like me? If you don't have the data, look at your chat transcripts from humans for the last 12 months, last 6 months, or you sit and chat with your end customer for a day and figure out how you would want it portrayed. So that kind of helps you set this experience up. And once you're done with your use case selection, the general thumb rule is you can start with something that is fairly simple, but the end result after discussions is generally, we can't do general AI today, everyone knows that. Okay, so what you need to look at is start with something that is potentially rules-based, that has FAQs at the back of it, that has resolutions that are repetitive at the back of it, that lead towards generative responses from a smart machine standpoint. So that is where you need to go at. Anything that is going towards here is a huge risk. Okay, any kind of bot endeavor that's going towards that direction, I mean, nobody has done it till date. Nobody will probably likely do it in the near future. I mean, at least commercially. So I think what we need to look at is once the use cases are defined, just sit back and see whether it fits in what criteria. If you're trying to achieve the top right, you're doing something wrong. Yeah. If it's impossible, obviously you can't. But at the end of the day, go towards things that start simple, that slowly embed key NLP, keep deep learning principles, and kind of get into a stage where you can make it look really smart without actually aiming for the moon. Okay. And the last bit in your entire toolkit is about training. Okay. So you will not put a person of a college into your brand chat. So the same is expected for your chatbot, especially if you're doing advanced bots with NLP. If you're going down the virtual assistant, virtual agent route, it is imperative for you to train, and it is imperative for you to retrain as well. Okay. If you have new things coming in, your FAQ changes, you're not updating the FAQ for the bot, it's a recipe for disaster. So you have to set those processes up. You have to set the training protocol. You have to set the processes to say these are the criteria under which I need to retrain. Okay, and continuous evaluation is a mantra for. Okay, you can have, when you deploy it, you can relook this every month, then look at it every quarter. But at the end of the day, having that time, your best place to decide. But it is important to train, and it's also important to start retraining when there are changes in process. Okay, and overall, when you're looking at it, reusability of components is important. So if you have platform solutions for bots, if you're building stuff on your own, this kind of simplistic architecture tells you how you can use it and how you can kind of set those different channels up. So essentially what you have in the iteration channel layers are channel specific customizations. So Facebook Messenger bot will have messenger specific customizations. A Twitter DM will have personalized DMs, for example. And I am on WhatsApp, cannot support anything today. They have something called quick replies that's just come in, but they don't supply anything that looks like a web bot. So you will have to have the core things reusable, and then you build your customer or channel experience into this layer. Okay, so maximum reusability here, minimum reusability here, because if you start putting the same bot across channels, it kind of makes it a lot harder. Okay, and one thing that you need to consider in this entire omni-channel deployment is the fact that a lot of channels are asynchronous. Okay, so if you look at FBM or if you look at WhatsApp, even though they look like chat, they are chat. It might work as chat in most cases. Having asynchronous messaging also needs you to think of how it would work when people are responding sporadically. This is both from a capability standpoint as well as response standpoint. Okay, and also try and see if you can do gamification. So if you have bots that are running that are being co-browsed by backend teams, kind of look to see how you can incentivize your humans to improve the bot capabilities, changing sentiments, changing responses. So if you have some kind of gamification enabled in your backend process, this works well when it's supervised. Okay. I'll take a quick pause there. Maybe we'll cover a few questions. There's just a couple of things on VoiceBot. This primarily is about, because VoiceBot's maturity is, I mean, it's there, but in terms of main scale deployment, it isn't. We'll just cover a few and then get into the examples. Does that work? Okay, I have quite a few questions here. Okay, we'll start with the first question, which is on, sorry. First question is from Mohan on, is deep learning required for implementing a chatbot solution? The answer is no. You just need to understand process, what you need to automate. This is not a tool. We're not doing technology selection on this call, but you can give me a buzz. We can talk about how we can get about to deploy bots later on. But the answer is no. How can chatbots help in resolving analytical queries? So this question, what do you mean by analytical queries? Maybe you want to follow that up. We can kind of look at. Yeah. CSAT is customer satisfaction. So CSAT basically is basically how satisfied the customers with your experience, bot or otherwise. So CSAT is how they're happy with the particular transaction or your overall relationship. There's a question on where can we get this bot, monthly subscription. We can skip those. How to make your first bot use learning resources. You basically have to ensure that you have that FAQ. So today bots can consume a URL with FAQs. So coordinating that is kind of key. So set up your knowledge base, set up the repository, and that kind of makes sure that you have your answers in there. So what's a typical timeline implementation? Basic chatbots can go live in a few weeks. Overall complex chatbot implementation can take months. But typically what you do is you start with a use case, look at how long it'll take to deploy. If you have integrations, it can take up to a month. If you're especially working and integrating with, if you're working for an enterprise. Typically what I do is we start with like a standard bot plan that has a 30-45 day implementation window, and we have a year-long use case adoption. So you can plan for the year, and you're obviously free to change that as you go along. So that answers your question. What is the cost of implementing the chatbot? The cost of implementing a chatbot can be as less as, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 rupees a month. You can have like basic flow-based bots implemented. There are bot vendors who are proprietary who would charge you 60, 70, $100,000 a year as well. It depends on the size of the organization, depends on what you're trying to do. If I'm making a chatbot for multiple audiences, retailers, ISPs, painters, can one bot do multiple communication? How does this work? It's a good question. So what you basically do is you have all your use cases defined. You root them out at the first point. If you're providing a single interface, let's say you're doing a WhatsApp bot. So you'll have one for retailers, two for ISP, three for painters. The use cases for each of them is at the back of it. So the answer is yes, you can do it. And how does it work? Each of them integrates with backends. They have different outputs and different outcomes. It's just that they come together at the first point of contact. Okay, and you can obviously have inclusions and exclusions. So a retailer will have a UID which you match before you allow him to get on his journey. So multiple stakeholders don't have intersections of journey. How necessary do you think is for a customer to know he or she is interacting with a bot? Current technology does not make it equivalent. Yeah, that's true. This again, I would wherever I have deployed it, the philosophy is that you need to tell them it's a bot. We're trying to mimic a bot as a human, that becomes incredibly hard. But there are certain scenarios in which you can do this. So if you kind of have a bot that does a very specific use case, people need not know that it's human or not. And there are certain bots that we have built that do a transition from a human to a bot. So if somebody comes with an order status on a Facebook page, we can route it to a Facebook Messenger that's completely automated. So even though an initial human took response of the Facebook comment, because you can't use bots in public. So it basically is something that you can plug in. Yeah. And you're right that it doesn't make it equivalent. It's not. The next question is, can training and retraining be fully automated? The answer is yes. I mean, if your knowledge repository can be updated? So hypothetically, yes. But if process involves changes to messaging platforms to endpoints, then the answer would be no. But I would say do a review. Even if you automate your knowledge base and the FAQs coming in out, it still makes sense to have it in. In our specific domain, any libraries can leverage for enhancing phonetics, hashtag at a distance. Sometimes algorithm makes mistakes. That's a very specific question. I'd like to know which domain. So you're talking about any libraries for leveraging. If you let me know which domain, maybe you can drop a mail. We can pick that up. The next question is, do chatbots access data from the cloud? Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Okay, so I think I've covered many. We'll leave a few for the end. We are running short of time now, right? I'll just quickly show you a few examples. I'll come back to questions in the last 5 minutes. Okay, so this is the current state of voice bots. So this is pretty cool. Oops, sorry.
Hi, is this Jessica?
Yes, this is she.
Great, Jessica. I'm calling IQ. We offer human-sounding conversational voice bots like me that can take care of your sales and marketing calls for you. Would you be interested in learning more?
Yeah, okay, great.
Awesome. Our voice bots have natural conversations with your leads and customers, allowing you to outsource simple calls, including everything from meeting and event reminders to qualifying leads over the phone. Would it make sense to schedule time with one of our sales reps to hop on a quick demo?
Yeah, I do think it makes sense to have a quick demo.
Okay. What works for you?
Let me look at my calendar here. I can do next Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Great. You are all set for next Thursday at 5 p.m. EST.
Okay, so this is one example of a voice bot making outbound calls. And surprisingly, obviously, legislation catches up last. So as of today, this is FCC compliant in the US. So a lot of robocalling is banned, but using a voice bot to call today isn't. So that's the state of actually using it for outbound. So if you have reminders to send to your clients and those kinds of things, you can kind of set it up and do it right away. Okay, this is an integration of how an insurance company is using voice services to kind of plug it into Alexa.
Alexa, launch Dara. Can you update my home address with Blue Insurance to 175 West 12th Street, Syracuse, New York, 16211?
Yes, I will update your home address with Blue Insurance for your auto policy and life insurance policy.
Thanks.
I also noticed that you do not have homeowners insurance with Blue Insurance. Would you like me to connect you to get a quote?
Yeah. Send update to my watch.
So this is another one that kind of has endpoints attached into advanced in terms of voice bot. Obviously, IVR is another area. We're not covering that today, but probably a topic for another time. It's an interesting discussion. Okay, so these are a couple of bot deployments that I've chosen one from each channel in a way. So the first is HelloFresh from Freddy. So this actually increased incoming messages by 47% and reduced the response rate by 76%. And if you look at how it is, let me just pull up my screen. Okay, so you can actually see that they have, it's NLP based. So when I said hi, it gave me this response. There's also a carousel at the bottom. So what they've taken into account is they've taken into account all the key things that are coming in. And they also have things like directly getting into customer care. So you can see how it works. So it's directly leading me. So if you look at it, the clicking is easier when I'm on my phone as well. So it's got a blend of NLP. It's got a blend of channel-based buttons and functionalities. There's also an outbound call. See, so you can click on this, and I can also. It's routing me into different areas. So missing ingredients is huge. Okay, they do delivery of food. At the end of the day, if there are missing ingredients, it's a critical item. So they're saying give us a call so we can help you out. Okay, the next bit is the WHO WhatsApp. So this is pretty cool for the way it's set up. Okay, so here you can see the WhatsApp experience today is such that we don't have buttons. We have a quick reply button that is currently, we have deployed it for a few customers, but you can see how it's emoji based, how it looks quirky. So this is a WHO COVID kind of initiative for WhatsApp. See, and you can see that they've directly click on me to get a survey. Okay, so I don't know where they found out. So you can see that if I type survey, they'll take a quick questionnaire on who I am and what I'm doing. Okay, so emoji based bolding of the text, link outs, these are key USPs that they've followed. I believe there's a lot of usage of this because the time to deployment for this was really low. Okay, the next one is Amtrak. So Amtrak Julie is very famous. I'm sure many of you must have seen it. So when you look at Amtrak Julie, it's basically allows for booking and reservations on Amtrak, which is the US railway system. So you can go in there and you can kind of, there you go. So it's directly giving me buttons. This is a complete web bot. So it helps me book buttons. They have a personality. It matches the brand. If you turn on the voice, you'll also find the audio that is. So it's also got a little bit of NLP. So it understands cities and locations. So this has become a booking channel in its own right. So people use Ask Julie to book tickets on Amtrak through the states. Okay, and to kind of top it, I just wanted to pick an example that was not in anything that we think is digital. SMS is still a digital channel. The University of Arizona actually set up a financial aid assistant that was completely SMS based. Okay, I can't show you this, but I've attached a link. I'm sure when the presentation reaches you, you can get it. If you have a US-based number, you can click on this and interact with the bot. Okay, so this is just to tell you that they found SMS was the most convenient for their target audience, especially people seeking financial aid. So it's a complete digital assistant just built complete on the SMS platform. Okay, the last slide before I just jump back to the questions is the fact that while you think of bots, also think about interactions. Okay, so what you need to look at is highest CX for best cost of ownership. So as of today, it's a blend. Doing away with humans is not recommended, not possible. You might have the best investment. Always have endpoints for critical customers. Look at iterations where people are stuck in loops and exit to customer service if you don't have the people at the end of it. And this is just a study that we have done. Okay, so overall, a blend of human handovers with chatbot is the best way to do it. Okay, and I can show you an example of how that looks. So this is on our system, you can see. So if there's a bot interacting, you can actually, sorry, I think it's logged out. Okay, but while it loads up, maybe I can answer some questions. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, Niranjan, what did you say?
I said I'll just take a few questions while this loads up. Yeah.
All right, Niranjan, we have 3 to 4 minutes left.
Yep. So I'm not able to pull out. Okay, so let me look at the next question, which is bank help desk that supports. Okay, there's a question on, do you think bank help desk that supports branches chatbot will be possible? Yes, of course. So we'll have one bot that has different, let's say we divide it by region. The same bot can have, it can also switch languages, north, south, east, west. We can also have a location specific bot. And we can have handovers to location representatives if the bot fails or if it's an important transaction or a HNI customer. So that routing is possible, and that kind of design is done, has been done. So yeah, definitely doable. I believe we will share the presentation post this, right? So there was a question on that. What skills are required to develop an order management chatbot? I mean, you need a little bit of technical skill to actually do the deployment, but primarily understanding of your customer base, integration with your backend, and choosing a platform on which you want to execute the bot. Okay, so I think those are the three things. So it's a blend of functional, business, technical is needed to develop an order management chatbot. specific frameworks to design chatbots for any specific requirement. There is no framework per se. So like I said, you just build it use case by use case, and you get it done. And I think some of the key criteria are listed in this deck. Alexa having its own voice like Siri, and voice bot to have its brand voice. Voice branding is not that important, not when you start off. But yeah, if it's an Indian customer, if you want an Indianized voice in your voice bot, yeah, it makes it important. But yeah, you can start with things that are broadly available and then decide if you want to have a voice that sounds like you. I think it's more of an expense situation. So there's just 3 questions left, which I have not been able to answer because of lack of clarity. Maybe they can let me know later on. Yes. So I think that pretty much covers it. I think we're 1 minute short. So if anybody has any other questions, I request you to post it in the Q&A box because the chat is a little jumbled. Okay, I think that's it from you guys. Anything that you want to add here?
All right. I guess thanks, Niranjan, for this wonderful session. Truly an experiential episode. And I'm sure each one of the participants enjoyed and learned something new today. And for all the audience, I will meet all of you on 11th of August on a topic on conversational AI. To register and for more details, please visit nasscom.in/events. Thank you so much, Niranjan, for your time and efforts for coming over and adding a very meaningful episode to our series. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akita. It was great talking to you all. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye. Take care.